working. Microphone working. So the last time was Dattatreya Jayanti? That's what we ended up talking about?
Yeah. You took a break.
We talked about viśiṣṭā and then Dattatreya. Viśiṣṭā Vedanta. Let me catch up here. Find my notes. Remember a password I haven't put into my computer in a year and a half, so give me it may take a few jokes.
Password?
The
password you said?
My notes are stuck. My notes are stuck in an online app called Sermonary. It's supposed to be helpful for sermon. So I'm not exactly doing a sermon, but
pretty much. I was just thinking that last night. I was like, it's so nice that he has to work on this stuff and have it ready for the weekend.
You used to do this, yeah?
It's like so nice.
You could just wing it.
Yeah.
I'm mostly just winging
He
it.
will. He will.
I'm mostly just winging it.
You'll be like, what was I going to Oh, yeah.
Pujya Swami Bhajanananda has a certain mode where he just sits and
He's in a different mode.
Yeah, he is, of course.
And he also has 1,000 scriptures in his head and unique, creative, never thought of interpretations of each one of them. And he's amazing. He's one of the most brilliant commentators I think I've ever met. I mean, Bhīma-nādinī wonderful. His name is Bhīma-nādinī. He lives in Kerala. Wonderful Swamiji.
He's scheduled to come back this summer too.
Good, wonderful.
He's a beautiful guy. Did you ever see him? I already took days off, so he does a Bhagavad conference every year.
Where?
I'm not sure. Last year was Tustin.
Now your entourage is really coming.
Thinking. It worked.
Yeah. You made it just in time.
Demo.
This is good. I know this is.
Okay. Oh, a few more. I think I didn't print enough. Is it okay?
Yeah, they're going to share.
Okay.
But that's it. There's no more.
Okay. Okay. Sorry for the wait. Getting things ready. We've been traveling. We just came back from India, so we're a little bit discombobulated and also a little bit bewildered due to what do they call it? Jet lag. Right now it's 5 a.m. in India, so getting ready for Mangalarati. So I'll opening praises. Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devya Matriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindevyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam Kaya Stapakaya Chiradmasya Sarvadharma Sarupine Avasara Ayati Namaha Mangalam Gurudevaya Devya Matriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindevyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Guru Reva Param Brahman Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Om Bhadra Kali Namo Nityam Saraswati Namo Namaha Veda Viranga Vedanta Vijastana Evacha Sri Ganesha Sharada Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om Jai Ma Jai Ma. So when was you have the date of our last class?
The Devi is the 7th of December.
7th of December. That's when our last meeting. together was for our India trip. And we were on the 1,000 names of Kali, Sahasranāma. And I think it was also, you mentioned Guru Dattatreya Jayanti. So we talked a few names and then we finished talking about Guru Dattatreya. That was a nice meditation. So we were on verse 40, and I think we finished, from as per my memory, up to name 326, viśiṣṭā. So just, I haven't looked at the verse, so forgive my pronunciation a little bit. Satyavatī dharma-niṣṭhā śrēṣthā niṣṭhura-nādinī gariṣṭhā duṣṭa-saṁhartī viśiṣṭā śreyasī ghṛṇā. So the last name was viśiṣṭā, and we talked that viśiṣṭā meant distinct. And so we took the opportunity to more or less talk about the nature of viśiṣṭā Vedanta, a school of Vedanta, that although admitting only one reality, a type of non-duality, it's actually called viśiṣṭā Advaita Vedanta, right? So the type of Advaita, but still admits distinction, right? That there's still a world, there's Bhagavan, the Lord, there's a world, Jagat, and there's Jiva, individuals, yet at the same time there's only Brahman. The Brahman has these qualities or these aspects, distinctions. So we spent a little bit of time on that. So the next name, jumping, śreyasī, śreyas. So what? Anybody know this term? Have you heard this term before? Śreyas.
Yes, a familiar term. It's familiar.
Because there's if you know from the, I think it's from the Kathopanishad perhaps,
Right.
Kathopanishad, where two paths in the Kathopanishad, Narchiketa tells Yama, the god of death, tells Narchiketa there are two paths that are present themselves before people. Right? And he says one is Śreyas and one is Priyas. Right? Anybody remember? Yeah, does it sound familiar? It sounds familiar to you. Anybody knows these? You know this verse.
Sounds familiar.
Anybody know what these Śreyas and Priyas? Because actually, this is like in the story. It's actually this is the most one of the most beloved of the Upanishads, and because the story is so charming beyond the spiritual teachings, where Narchiketa, he because of his shraddha, his sincerity, sometimes translated as faith. But faith, I remember I had a 20-year debate with Swami Bhajanananda on whether or not Shreyas means faith or not. He said there's another word for faith, because like it's not faith. We can never find the proper word. Sometimes we think of it like some spiritual sincerity, right? Because of that, he was sent to death by his father, by his annoyed father. And so he went to the abode of death, Yama, and for 3 days he waited because Yama was out of town, was away for the day, was on vacation. And he came back and he saw this young man full of the fire of Shraddha. And he says, because you've been 3 days without me coming, I'll give you 3 boons. Right, and so one boon is that when he's reborn, his father will recognize him. There'll be no animosity between them. Another, that he'd learn a special sacrifice by which heaven is attained, if I believe it. But the third one is, what is the nature of Brahman? What is it exists? What's the nature of the self? And more or less. And the king of death says, ask for anything else. I love these verses. I'm very fond of the Kathopanishad. He asks for anything else, right? And he says, ask for riches, ask for long life, or ask for heavenly worlds and beautiful women and beautiful enjoyments, a long list of enjoyments. I'll give you unlimited enjoyments and the type of body to fully appreciate their sweetness. Our body is not very good at this, right? And says, no, how can I ask for these things after seeing your face? That's one of my favorite lines. Looking at death, how can we ask these things, right? So he accepts and begins to teach the nature of Brahma Vidya, the nature of the self, nature of Brahman. And this is one of the first things he says, right? And so this is the first thing we should think about when we start the path of spiritual life, about the nature of Brahma Vidya, path of Brahma Vidya. So there's 2 paths that are present before all of us. One is Śreyas, one is Priyas. Śreyas, let me see if I think I may have even written down the verse. Śreyas here means the good, and prayas means the pleasant. So in every moment, there's two things presented: the good and the pleasant. Right? Of course, this is a bit of a harsh. Sometimes pleasant's not always bad, right? But still, the good and the pleasant come to man, and the thoughtful mind turns around them and distinguishes. The wise choose the good from the pleasant, but the dull souls choose the pleasant rather than the good, rather than getting of his good and its having. It's a very strange line. This is Sri Aurobindo's translation. It's like a strange translation. Some another, the book I had near me is Sri Aurobindo. It's not the most common translation. So the wise choose the good, and the foolish or the dull, the non-thinking, non-distinguishing, choose the pleasant. So, I mean, what is good and what is pleasant? So, generally, the first swipe of commentaries, you describe that which is good, what is good for the self, what is good for our spiritual life, what's good for our advancement, right? That is śreyas, and that which is pleasing, what is pleasing to the senses, tasty to the senses, right? That is called prayas. Prayas means good, and but actually it has a meaning of like best or better, right? So I think it's like if you're like in classic Sanskrit dictionaries, it'd be like better, preferable, superior, right? That type of meaning. So whatever we think, like sometimes we don't. I also feel a little uncomfortable making these very harsh distinctions between the good and the pleasant, and make this, a very dualistic and sometimes I think that there's a danger in that. If anything's good, that's not good for you. If anything's tasty, don't eat it. Anything's pleasant, it's like that's not the best thing. So there's a danger in that type of thinking, perhaps. I think we also have inherited culturally our ambient religious traditions some of this that sometimes makes it complicated. And reaction to it. But if we think of that which is better, right? Something may be pleasant, but there may be something better than it, right? Something may be enjoyable, right? But maybe there's something better than that. Maybe there's a higher joy or higher benefit, right? So I like this idea of it being better. I'm remembering we had a colorful Swami who used to come here years ago, Swami Mahadevananda. He was a colorful Swami. Right, but I remember his term. He was unusual. His language was unusual, to say the least. Right, right. But one of the things, like he like I'd say something, or mention some saint or some practice or some habit, and he goes best. That's best, and it's like, and not that one, that best, that was his standard. Like whatever is the best thing, you should do that, right? And sometimes he says something. His habits weren't that good. He says, not so good, but that is not the best, right? But I remember that language it's a strange way of talking, but it's like he'd point to somebody, a picture of a saint, or to Ramakrishna, best, or some practice that's best, like out of all the things you can do, this is the best one you can do. This in that category of best, right?
Because we're so used to in the West this duality of good and evil.
Yeah,
This is a very different.
It's a different way of
and
thinking.
it's a little more, like you said, it's hard to. A little more nuanced.
Yeah.
It's a little more what's good and pleasant. It's not so clear.
Yeah.
But I thought
So it's not that you should choose between good and evil.
Yes.
You choose what's best, what's the highest possible thing available. When you get, because the way the Katapana, two things present themselves, and so maybe that's a psychological principle that in every moment, every decision is two decisions: what is easy and pleasant, and what is good, or what's a better choice. Sometimes good choices are also pleasant. That's also so. But there's also a thing. I'm thinking of my own Guruji, Swami Vishwadevananda Maharaj. His language. This would be something he'd said a lot. It's a common thing to say, but it was one of his go-to sayings. Right. He says that that some things are pleasant in the beginning, right? They're sweet in the beginning, right, and bitter in the end, right? They start out sweet, but they end up bitter. And you use an example of like sweets, right? They're sweet in the beginning, right, but they give you bad health, right, and diabetes or whatever, whatever the situation is, right, right. And then he says some things. He says spiritual disciplines, right? You can see what he considered to be best. Spiritual disciplines are bitter in the beginning. Maybe not eating the sweet.
Yeah.
Can you say such a thing? I don't know. At a Kali temple, not eating this Bengali Kali temple is very difficult to say don't eat the sweet, right? But some discipline. But the discipline is the bitter in the beginning, but it'll be nectar at the end. That's his language, right? So spiritual practices are not always easy. They're not always the most pleasant choice. Waking up early is not as easy as sleeping in, right? Eating moderately is not nearly as fun as overeating. I know this for a fact, right? Whatever. I mean, these are just two examples. There's 1,000 million examples. At every moment, there's an example. So here Ma saying, in this list of names, one of her names is the highest or the best. So you can say, oh, Ma's the best. That's out of all things, she's best, right? So of course she's the highest of all things, and therefore she's the best choice. She's the best of everything, but also she's also the psychological principle of always choosing the best is a way to her. Perhaps this is a way to think of it. Best, most excellent qualities, most desirable. So she is the best. She has all the excellent qualities, and she's most desirable. Then verse 320, name 328, ghṛṇā. So ghṛṇā, that's an interesting. Sanskrit is difficult, and this is not my specialty. Ghṛṇā seems to have two different meanings, right? It could mean like a warm, compassionate, tender feeling towards somebody, right? It has that kind of warm, like. But the more common meaning is like hatred. So it's interesting that these two names are so close to each other, right? And I'm leaning towards the negative interpretation of this name only because of the cluster in the names in which it comes. There's names where she's horrible, she's tremendous, it's in a list of the fierce aspects, right? But I'm just saying there's like many words, there's a full spectrum. And I don't know if it was enough Sanskrit that the ghṛṇā means I don't know what it means, but it's a root of both of these ideas, right? So something closer, maybe hatred's a strong word. I think Swami Satyavananda translated "she who is hatred." So that's something. Maybe it's not the best, right? But she's hatred, right? Another way to think of it is hatred's a strong word. That's a very emotional, like value. That's a lot of emotional intensity to that. It could be aversion to something, or contempt to something, or dislike of something, strong dislike. Right? In the ghṛṇā could be spelled grahana if you're looking it up. So hatred, scorn, loathing, that's a great word. I look at varieties of words. Abhorrence, right? But also kind, obliging, friendly, generous, like this, right? Looking with compassion. So however we interpret it, either it's gentle, warm, looking with compassion, or scorn, abhorrence, loathing, and hatred. These are both strong psychological modes or qualities, right? And in her stories, there's stories of Kali. If you go to the mythologies, and the stories of Kali being angry, attacking demons, killing armies, right? There's also of her of loving compassion towards her devotees. Then there's interesting. Now, just now, I'm just remembering in the Chandi, in the Shakrari Stuti, which is the hymns Indra, and after the killing of Mahishasura, the buffalo demon Mahishasura, the gods praise her, and they say, putting in their praise what they think the goddess must be thinking. They put words in her mouth, right? It says, these demons, right, deserve, sinful as they are, deserve long suffering in hell, right? They deserve to be killed for what they've done and who they are, right? But instead, let them be liberated by meeting their death with the weapons in my divine hands, right? So by her killing them, rather than letting them just continue to be horrible and sinful and just go deeper and deeper in darkness, right? And get their just rewards of hell, long dwelling in hell, right? But she thinking, let me liberate them, right? By killing them directly, right? And then the gods then say, you're compassionate even to these enemies, right? So maybe there's a play. I'm just thinking out in real time. Maybe there's a play between these two meanings of compassion and anger, or compassion and hatred, right? That even her hatred in the Leelas is ultimately to their benefit, right? There's a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Narada Muni, put in Narada Muni's mouth. Narada curses the sons of Kubera to be born and to be these Arjun trees that eventually Krishna knocks down, right? You know this story. And he curses them. He says, and then they freak out. Oh my God, we've been cursed, right? He says, do not worry, right? The curse of a sage is always a blessing, right? Even the curse of Narada's curse will only be to their benefit. And there's a long story why. Same thing. For such beings, it would take millions of lifetimes to liberate themselves. They were liberated in one lifetime by being knocked over by Krishna. So even Ma's seemingly horrific fear in the stories also, when she's killing demons or fighting armies and like that, in those kind of martial images, she does these things, but there's a beauty to it, there's a divinity to it. So we see these states in her gunas and her stories. These can be described as psychological states, right? But if we interpret these things, even these extremes, as psychological states of hatred, of avarice, of compassion, of tenderness, whatever these states are, these are also her. In Yadevi Sarvabhuteshu, right? And that goddess who exists in all beings in the form of, and that long list are just mental states. And the compassion and hunger and thirst and peacefulness and bewilderment and confusion and satisfaction. They're all just mental states. She's all these mental states, right? It's another way of thinking it. So these mental states, in and of themselves, are not good or bad. They're not bad in and of themselves. They have their function also. They're also her. So I found actually today, luckily, I should look at these verses. I had been away for a couple months, right? Looking at the verses, I said, I wish I had there's another translation I use. The existing translation that's out there, I can give my own translation of the verses, but one that's easily available, Swami Satyananda's. But there's an earlier translation by a disciple of Anandamoy Ma named Premlata Paliwal. I've quoted. Actually, I don't know if it's a man or a woman. I always assumed it was a female, but I don't know. And he or she, they, maybe we just say, if we don't know, we just say they. Let us be bold and run towards the moment. They they always give interesting, like very flowery and wordy definitions, and sometimes I don't think they're that good. Some things are wrong, enough for us to want to redo them. But sometimes there's insight because they thought of it, right? So he says this ghṛṇā is detachment and apathy to the world. Here's the quality in a devotee, right? To be detached or uninterested in the world, right, itself is a good quality of a devotee. So in these coming names, because I found the book after a long time, the names are coming back into her translation has come back into my world. So that's a name 328. So the next verse, the next group of names, bhīmā, bhayānakā, bhīmā-nādinī, prabhāvatī, vāgīśvarī, śrīr-yamunā, yajña-kartrī, yajuḥ-priyā.
Sorry.
Got it? Sorry, I'm not. Usually we can chant, but I'm a little nervous to chant it out loud because I haven't practiced it in a long time.
Okay.
Bhīmā, Bhīma, bhayānakā, bhīmā-nādinī, prabhāvatī, vāgīśvarī, śrīr-yamunā, yajña-kartrī, yajuḥ-priyā. Okay, it's not so difficult.
You're a queen.
She's good. She has years chanting Sanskrit. So what are these? Let's see. What do these say? So bhīma. There's a character in the Mahabharata called Bhīma. Right? Anybody know who it is? He's one of the He's on. You know what his name means? Bhīma. You know what his name means?
Strain.
Strengths could be. He is strong, right? It means like horrible. It's like because he takes a vow, right? A brahmacharya vow, right? Does that get the right thing? Yes, right. So he
Bhīmā.
Hmm?
I was confusing.
No. So, I'm thinking of Bhishma because Bhishma's name has B in it.
Yes.
That's what I'm thinking. There is a bhīma also. It's slightly different. Same also means strong and powerful, right? But here the same. But I'm thinking of Bhishma. Bhishma he promised. God, it is embarrassing. Mahabharata is one of the main of the five, literally the five main characters, 5 or 6 main characters of Mahabharata. But he promised that he would not challenge the throne of Hastinapur. And for that, he said, "I renounce any claim to the throne." He says, "But you may have children, and they'll challenge my children." Right. So he took a vow. He took a vow in front of the gods. Then I won't have any children, so that my children will not. And I promise always support. I will not challenge you. I will not have children that will challenge you or your children. And I vow to always fight for your protection. So he's actually in the final of the Mahabharata. He's on the bad side. He's a great dharmic warrior, but they still lost. But he had to. His dharma was even fighting Arjuna and Krishna on the wrong side because he had to live by the dharma. But when he took that vow of brahmacharya as a king, right, the gods screamed Bhīma or Bhishma. It means horrible, right? Such a horrible vow, right, to expect from somebody, right? So that there's one of that word comes there. So it's terrible or fierce, and perhaps Bhīma, one of the Pandava brothers, maybe that's the same meaning. Huge and gigantic. The Bhīma could be the mighty one. So these are good qualities, ways of describing Kali, right? She's fierce, she's tremendous, she's the mighty one, right? But and here horrible is maybe sometimes we say what's another word for horrible is awful, right? Another word, right? Awful because that's interesting.
Yeah, it's like
There's. I think this is true. This is a little factoid we grew up with in our first swipe at biblical studies in college and things like this, right? Is that I think maybe I have to be careful because this may not be historically accurate, but take it for what it is as a oral tradition from Kali Mandir oral tradition. But in the King James version of the Bible, they had 2 different teams of This is what I learned. There's 2 different teams of translators, right? One was working on the Old Testament, one was working on the New Testament. And for the same word, or at least the same idea, the Old Testament scholars use the word awful, meaning full of awe, right? And the New Testament scholars use the word wonderful, full of wonder. They have the exact same meaning, right? But the meaning has migrated on both of them in different directions. So we think of horrible or awful as negative, right? Right. But it's like it's overwhelming, right? So perhaps even this when we think of all these horrible forms or awful forms of ma, fierce forms of ma, right? These are not the best words. Right, it could be another way of saying that which is beyond our conception, overwhelms our mind, overwhelms us. But still, Bhīma also in Sanskrit means like it can cause fear, it can cause terror, right? And you can see in the stories, that's a quality in the Kali's, in many of the Kali stories. She appears on the battlefield like this, right? And also, I mean, even to her devotees, sometimes there's very fierce forms, and we'll talk about the nature of fierce forms compared to other forms. Oops, I don't know what happened here. Sorry, I lost something here. Yeah, I was looking at various like tantric texts to look for where this name appears. Other places, in the Devi Panchaka Shataka, bhīmā is she who is translated as she who is ferocious. Right, ferocious is an interesting term. It's just like ferocious is not a value judgment as bad or good. It's just like
Oh, yeah, description, yeah.
very strong. Right. Yes.
It appears in the Hanuman Chalisa as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, bhīma-rūpa, right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, she used shukshma-rūpa and bhīma-rūpa. He can become really, really small and really big and powerful, right? Sometimes there's been some Indian families that come and they say, oh, and they see our Hanuman, and my daughter loves Hanuman. Oh, you love Hanuman? We have a beautiful Hanuman in the other room. Let me take you, right? He's really tiny though. And I take him outside. And they come to see this big Hanuman. Oh my God, he became big. And I quote, and these kids know Hanuman Chalisa, and I quote the verse, and they're like, wow, right? Because in the stories he becomes really small, like an insect, and he can be big enough to carry mountains, right? So that's another way of thinking of bhīmā. She can become. So also in the Upanishads, even description of Brahman is like subtler the subtlest and greater than the greatest. One without a second. So it's like bigger than anything and tinier than anything. Our Guruji used to quote that a lot. He'd quote that, the Almighty is subtler the subtlest, greater than the greatest, only one without a second. That was his common tag. Bhīmā bhayānakā. Did I lose one? Bhayānakā. No, I think I pushed a button and everything got mixed up.
Oh boy.
Okay, no, I think I two got switched. 330, right? Bhayānakā. So, bhaya here means fear. Like this is bhaya. Abhaya mudra means fearlessness, right? Bhaya means fear. So if she's tremendous, if she's huge and powerful and overwhelming, that she can also cause fear. Right, she is one who is extremely fearful. Fearful, not as in she's scared. Fearful, is that the same word? Fearful is one who causes fear? That's the same, because fearful is somebody who's scared.
Frightful.
Frightful. It's the same, I just... anyway.
It is,
I think in context, because frightful could still be the same, I think, too.
No, something's frightful, but you're fearful.
Fearsome.
Fearsome. She's fearsome. She's fearsome. That's maybe that's what I'm trying to. She's fearsome. She's frightful and fearsome, right? And causes us. We're fearful. Frightful, terrible, formidable, right? A formidable is like an enemy that's would likely win. That's a formidable enemy, right? So you can be scared to lose to the enemy. Dreadful. These are other synonyms of this, right? Yeah. Bhayānakā is listed in classical in the rasas in Indian aesthetics, right? There's different rasas, different relationships and moods. One of which is Bhayānakā, which is fearful, right? Even like for an actress or a dancer, there's an eye expression that expresses Bhayānakā. The eyelids raised and fixed, the pupils bright and fluttering. That's the description in Natya Shastra and dance, in the science of dance, of this particular sentiment, right? You can express it, right? So if she is Thank you. tricky when your phone is also your camera. So if you can be scared of her, right? And many of the stories have people horrified of her, howling like jackals in the cremation ground. Descriptions of her are quite. Some of the script, you look in the Chandi, just in the even a very popular text, you describe her as quite frightening. When Kali first appears, a Chandika first appears like this, right? Very fearful. Right. The question is, who's scared of her? Right. Right. And so years ago, we mentioned this before. Somebody else, one of our friends, was giving classes on the Chandi and Devi Mahatmyam during Navaratri, and he was reading this incredible description of when Kali first appears, and it describes her with fangs and all these. I mean, in a very fearful way, a very dramatic image, right? And our friend Sadananda, he raised his hand. He says, "Well, we don't see her that way, right? She looks so beautiful here." And he says, "Of course not. You're not a demon, right? If you're a demon, she'd be death, right? To a child, she's like mother, right? There's a difference, right? So these images are frightful to whom, right? Frightful to who would be frightful, who is scared of such an image, of such a reality." That other translator, Premlata Paliwala, her translation is the spirit of fear, irresistible in nature, leading to the absolute decay in asuric shakti, in the demonic energy, right? As opposed to divine energy. So it's fearful because it diminishes the asura shakti, the energy of the demonic energy. So if you're a demon and you're fighting Kali, then you have something to fear. For a devotee, there's nothing to fear. She appears very differently. She's a mother. And we'll go back to that in a few names here. Then, bhīḥ. No. I skip one? No, this is the one that got switched on me. Bhīmā-nādinī. So bhīma, again, big, horrible, strong, fierce, overwhelming. Nada means sound. Nadini is the female form of it, right? She who is a fierce sound or a fierce roar. And the Chandi, just not even from the Chandi itself, she roars loudly. That's one of my favorite lines, right? She roars loudly. And one of the things that her bow, her sword scraped the sky. Her crown scraped the sky, right? She roars loudly. The sound of her bell, the twang of her bow. The image is it's quite the image, right? From the shakes from the hellish realms to the heavenly realms. Everything gets shaken by the sound, right? Right. So in the stories, it's like she appears as tremendous sound, right? This is also a code, right? In the Chandi itself and another text, refers to a particular mantra. And for the sake of education, we'll say the mantra it's hum. Hum is called the kurcha bija. Right, it's also known as the bhīmā-nādinī, the horrible sound or tremendous sound, right? Right. It says it's the mantra of the Vedas, the heroes worship. It's also the mantra of Mahakal, of the Lord of Bhairava, right? And so, like in the story, also in the Chandi, also at one point, a huge army approaches the goddess, and she goes hum. And the entire army within 1 second is burnt to ashes. So that's the power of this mantra, right? It describes it's many verses describing the demons, what their names are, how they're dressed, what weapons they're carrying, their chariots, how many elephants, and all like this full array of this huge army, right? And they all approach the god. You can imagine out of scene from Lord of the Rings or something, the incredible thing. And then she goes hum, and they're all gone. Right, that's the power. That's her sound, right? And so commentaries on this text have described, of course, it's a particular mantra, right? But it's mantra in general, right? This is how we overcome these negative, our asuric shaktis, our asuric energies, negative or problematic qualities can be overcome through sound, through mantra, perhaps. So what? Brahma-nādinī, bhayānakā. Then where are we? Bhīḥ. That same word, bhīḥ means bhīma, you've heard that word already, bhīmā and bhīmā-nādinī. So now just be itself. So maybe in describing, we should have started with be. Be means just simply fierce. She who is not fear, she who is fierceness. Right? You can say that she's has a tremendous sound, or she causes fear in her enemies, like that. But she is fierceness itself, as the quality itself. Right? In Premlata's translation, she says that this is the term that symbolizes the terror-ridden cosmic nature of the Divine Mother Mahakali, who is highly intolerant of imperfections. That's like, so this, what did that sound after? The sounds after are imperfections, right? So those aspects ourselves may be scared of the sound, right? So we can take, because soon, the next little batch of names here, prabhāvatī, vāgīśvarī, śrīr-yamunā, yajña-kartrī, yajña-priyā, now changes, right? From causing fear and being horrible, and a horrible sound, and the previous names of destroyer of wickedness in the previous cluster, these very fierce forms. Now we're getting to a bunch of names that are quite benign, right? I just a hint. Prabhāvatī, she who shines with divinity, right? Vāgīśvarī, the goddess of vibrations, Saraswati. Śrī, the goddess of respect and splendor and auspiciousness, Lakshmi, right? Yamuna, the goddess, the Yamuna, who is very thought of and bathing and purifies one of all sins, right? Yajña-kartrī, the one who is the doer of all sacrifices. Yajuḥ-priyā, she who is dear, who loves the chanting of certain Vedic hymns. So you get into these modes, right? So I think maybe we could discuss a little bit in my mind. This is what I had sketched this out before going to India, so I have to look it up. About the difference of these two categories of goddesses. And usually we think of there's two types of goddesses, right? Or two aspects of one goddess also, or like. And the common thing is ugra and saumya. This is the technical terms. Ugra means angry or fierce, right? Angry deities or fierce deities, and saumya means peaceful or gentle deities. And sometimes it's the same deity. Like we have in the corner we have a Nishingadev. He's a Shanta Nishingadev or a Saumya Nishingadev because of what he's holding in his hands, right? Although his face looks very fierce, right? But then there's other Nishingadevs where he's disemboweling Hiranyakashipu, right? That is considered an Ugra Nishingadev, right? And so there's different rules for their worship, right? There's different mantras, different dhyan slokas, and different qualifications of who can worship Ugra Nishingadevs and Shanta Nishingadevs and like this. So Ugra means aggressive. The stance is aggressive. Like if you haven't been to India yet, right? So you haven't been. Anybody been to Mayapur Hare Krishna Temple? They have this. They have the Ugra of Ugra and Nishingadevs, right? This it's quite incredible. I'm thinking about it, I get all riled up. It's one of those exciting deity, right? And they moved it into a big temple now, right? But even before, and it was happened. They had a commission. There was a crime committed. Dacoits attacked the temple many years ago, right? And I think even a devotee may have been killed, or maybe the dacoit was shot. It was a big thing where they were thinking the deities were made of gold. And, it was a bad thing. It was a really bad. And the place where, I don't know if I don't get it historically wrong, the place where the dacoit was killed, right? That's where they installed this deity to protect the temple, right? And it was commissioned in South India, and they had to get Shankaracharya's permission to carve it, because no carver would make it, because the rules of its worship are a little strict, can only be done by brahmacharis and things like this, right? And it's not just fierce, but it's in the act of pouncing. It's jumping to attack. So it's definitely Ugra. If Ugra means aggressive, it's like about to get you, right? Quite something. That's why it's full dynamic. It's full certain type of Shakti. Right. So it was played because they needed this protection, so this would never happen again like this, So that's Ugra deities and Samya deities. So very often, like in my room, I have a Nishingadev that's full Samya. It looks like a kitty cat, right? It has Lakshmi in his lap and Prahlad at his feet, right? And he's already sat down. He's calmed down. In the story, if you know the story of Nishingadev, when he first appeared, since he's absolute, his anger is absolute also. So it's absolute anger, and all the gods are terrified of him, right? Nobody could approach him, and he's so angry he's going to destroy the universe. He's already killed Hiranyakashipu, the enemy who had to be killed, but everybody was scared, and even Lakshmi, his wife, wouldn't go near him. So they push Prahlad, the little boy in devotee, right? And so the story goes, he calms him down. In the main story, other than the story, he pushes Prahlad and goes off to slaps Prahlad aside and goes to destroy the universe. There's other versions of the story. In the Shiva, Shiva takes a form and he has to. Anyway, there's a really interesting story. There's never only one story of anything, right? But in the mainstream story, from the Srimad Bhagavatam, for instance, and the and Narasingha Purana, we just use those two forms, right? So once he calms down, so then the story of Prahlad calms him down, right? And then when Prahlad calms him down, right, then Lakshmi sits in his lap, and it's like, now it's Lakshmi, like Lakshmi Narayan again, right? That's Shanta Nishinga, right? And so there's a beautiful hymn attributed to Shankaracharya, to Lakshmi Nishinga, praising them, for health and happiness and wealth and prosperity, all the things we want, everything everybody wants, right? Beautiful, beautiful prayers. So that's an example of the same deity being Saumya and Ugra. But there's also deities that are Ugra and certain deities that are Saumya. Certain deities are all auspicious. Other deities are by nature fierce deities, right? Like there's not a non-fierce form of Chinnamasta. Chinnamasta is itself, her name is Prachandika, the most horrible of horrible forms. The most fierce of all fierce forms, Prachandika. Right? Chandika means fierce, and Prachandika means most fierce, right? So you can paint her beautifully, but she's the one who cuts off her own head. She's, that's not an easy thing, right? But so there are deities so there's two different classes of deity, but also many deities have both these qualities, fierce and Saumya. And then there's some that are mixed. They call them Saumyogra forms, that are both these forms. In modern academics, a famous professor who, so we don't get our Facebook and YouTube canceled. I'm not going to mention her name, right? Because she's controversial, right? But she coined a term in her early writings on goddesses. She called it fang goddesses and breast goddesses. That was her way of analyzing the two different types, like Lakshmi and Kali, right? Lakshmi is a nurturing goddess, a motherly goddess, and Kali or Chinnamasta or Dhumavati or Bhairavi or Chamunda. These would be fang goddesses. But of course, that distinction, perhaps it's a little bit useful, but it's not fully useful because sometimes it's the same goddess appearing in two different forms, And the assumption in this hymn of the Kali Sahasranāma that it's the same goddess, because the same list of names, some names of Saumya, some names of Ugra, right? It's the same goddess. In that story of Nishingadev and Prahlad, I'm very fond of the story. I gave, I think, 18 talks on Nishingadev Leela, at least, maybe 20 or something. When they push Prahlad towards him, one thing Prahlad, when he starts his prayers, he says, "I'm not scared of you." Even Lakshmi is scared of the god of death is scared of Nishingadev in this form, right? He says, "I'm not scared of you." And he says the reason. He says the reason you've taken this horrible form is not. This is not the normal form of God. This is the form that kills the horrible demon. He manifested in order to kill a demon, and there he is, dead on the ground. Right. So the demon's already been killed. Right. He says, and he does it in order to protect devotees. I'm not a demon. I'm a devotee. So a devotee has nothing to fear from these fierce forms, right? You manifest a form to kill demons. The demons are being killed. You've manifested a form in order to protect devotees. We're devotees. We have nothing different. Therefore, I have zero fear of you. He says, not only am I not fearful of you, I'm predicting that in the future, people who are scared will pray to this form to get over fear. This form will not cause fear, but this will be prayed to when people are scared. And sure enough, this is a very common thing during times of fear. If you think dark night and trying to get to your car, something like that, you pray to the Shingadev and go, remembering this fierce form. Because that fierce form's only purpose is to protect, is to destroy the evil and protect devotees. We're not evil and we're devotees. Hopefully. Right. So, in the traditional understanding, in these leelas, including in the stories of Kali, right? Time. In the stories of Kali and the different goddesses, in the Chandi, in the Devi Bhagavatam, Devi Mahatmya, and the another text, Skanda Purana, many texts describe these different leelas of battles where Kali comes and fights in these dramatic battles like this. It's never just for the sake of killing people, right? It's primarily for protection, right? It's for destruction of something that needs to be destroyed, right? And or maybe more subtly transformation, something to be transformed, right? The purpose isn't to scare you, right? Right. We can think as a sadhana text. We can think of it as it. What does it destroy? It destroys ignorance. It destroys in the stories. Ignorance is destroyed, or ego is destroyed. Symbolically, right? It removes obstacles. These forms remove obstacles that block or hinder our spiritual life, right? And also these fierce forms. Those of us who worship fierce forms, those of you who worship forms, also give devotees strength, right, to overcome difficulties, right? Praying to these, feeling that you have such a mother behind you or such a Lord behind you, the fierce forms of we have Hanuman behind us, or Narasingha behind us, or Kali or Tada behind us, right? That gives us strength to fight the battles of life, right? Right, and face life's challenges. There's also things like, we pray for them to destroy our enemies, right? There's also that, right? This is not what I'm encouraging, this interpretation. But there's also that, right? That I think is intrinsically, self-obviously dangerous, right? Because if what she's destroying is our demonic qualities, asura shakti, right? I think the desire to kill our enemies is such a quality. Right, so we're guaranteed to backfire, right? There's a sloka of pranam mantra to, again, I'm familiar because we know a lot of mantras to Nishingadev from our early sadhanas, that says that you are like great, you are the great. I mean, Nishingadev is half man, half lion. So the prayer of him is like a lion, right? A lion whose fierce fangs, right, are death to its prey, right? But the same fangs are nurturing to its cubs. And you see when a cat goes after a mouse, those teeth are death itself, right? Mrityu, the death of the Nishingadev mantra says the death of death itself. You are the death of death, right? But those same fangs, when it grabs the kittens, like, they give up. Like you've seen how a way a cat carries a kitten, or a dog carries a puppy, like that. Just so the same thing. So to these fierce forms, right? To a devotee are itself benign forms. They're samya. Right, because sometimes we see we look at these fierce forms, and people think I'm back in my high school days, Purva Ashram. I worked at a video store, at a record store, right, and we had another employee who was a big fan of hardcore heavy metal, right, and so I think I'm going to show her something and see what's her reaction. There was a heavy metal band, I'm not even sure if heavy metals is maybe not the right genre. It's beyond heavy metal band called the Cro-Mags. Anybody know about the Cro-Mags? Cro-Mag. Thank you. So it's been a long time, right? So they were they had some attachment to the Hare Krishna movement, right? They weren't the classic devotees. This is before even the straight edge stuff. This was a long time ago. And the cover of their cassette, I remember back when there was cassettes, right, was the famous painting of that the Hare Krishnas have, of Hiranyakashipu, Nrsimhadev ripping apart Hiranyakashipu, like that. And I showed it to her. I said, "What do you think of this picture?" "Oh, this is gross. They should make this illegal. They should never allow this to." I don't know how they got past the censor. They should have some. It was very interesting to hear a heavy metal person critique this painting because she had no understanding what she was seeing, right? And in the painting, right, this very bloody and fierce form, right, Prahlad, the devotee, is at his feet, right, trying to put a garland on him. Like there's a garland he's garlanded, described as garlanded in entrails of his father. It gets really gross, the image like that. But he's trying to put a flower garland on him. So he's not seeing what my friend saw, and wanted her to a higher standard for album art, right? She was, Prahlad simply. So actually, Lord Chaitanya makes his point. What did Prahlad see Nrsimhadev, or did he see Krishna? Or he only saw his Lord. He saw something beautiful. He didn't see what Hiranyakashipu saw. That's the point. Otherwise, he wouldn't. The image that painting brings that image quite strongly. Yeah. I think it is 6:33. It's perfect time. We started 3 minutes late and we ended 3 minutes late.
It's actually early for you.
Yeah, this is pretty good. But we'll give a few minutes for any discussion or comments or vehement challenges, rejections. Yeah.
And with the distinction between Ugra and Samya,
Yeah.
is part of that like difficulty of access, right? Like, would we say that Ugra forms are less willing to respond to prayers or less accessible, higher barrier?
The which forms are less accessible?
The Ugra forms, maybe, or
Could
maybe
be. I think. I mean, it is. Actually, let me see. I think I wrote something here in my notes. It's an energy example. It's an example I skipped. I was just talking without looking down. Is the basic nature of electricity supposed to be forgiving, understanding, calm, and benevolent? Right? You wouldn't say that about electricity. Simply is what it is. Right? Right? Of course not. In some form, it is dangerous and dangerous to handle. Bhairava, for instance, this is a writing I found on Bhairava. Right? Bhairava, the fierce form of Shiva. Right? Bhairava, for example, right, is a god of annihilation and destruction. Right? So of course, be careful how you approach that. It's such a if it's so the Ugra forms. Perhaps there are people who purposely worship these forms because of their strong power, right? But because of that, there are restrictions to worship. The restrictions to like purposely worshiping Ugra forms. Are like this Nrsimhadev in Mayapur. The restriction has to be niṣṭhura brahmacharis, lifelong brahmacharis, right? The pujari is going to be lifelong brahmacharis, right? Nobody else is allowed to touch the deity, right? So the rules are stronger for that, and whatever reason. There's Ugra Nrsimhadev Shalagram. The same rule is there, right? So it can't be worshipped in the home. Shanta Nrsimhadev can be worshipped in the home. Although I recently did some research on this point, asking some devotees who know, he says that's probably not universally true for shalagrams, but it's true in certain temples, but not everywhere. So there I think there's the fierce forms can be are sometimes worshipped because of their immediate response, but they're because of the fierce nature that they're more potential. More dangerous may be the right word, but not like because they're bad, only because it's like they're so powerful, and therefore the Saumya forms, there's way less restriction, less esoteric guardrails for their worship, right? If you were to, just pray, just, oh Lord, it's like you'd have to, so I'm not sure if that answers, but those who are specifically doing sadhanas to fierce forms are doing so because they believe, whether it's true or not, they believe that there's going to be a powerful response. But because of that, I think there's more danger, potential dangers. And of course, like, what's the danger of worship? So in regular worship, there's no real danger. You pray to God. You pray for God. You pray to God for blessings. You pray to God for protection. Neither the protection and blessings are always auspicious prayers, no matter what form you're praying to, right? Right. But when you're dealing energetically, and some of these sadhanas to such forms are by nature, they've developed in esoteric circles, and maybe legitimately, maybe not legitimately, right? But they have a mystique of danger around them, right? And therefore, there's restrictions of initiation, and you sometimes prerequisite sadhanas before certain sadhanas are done. But sometimes I think these things are probably not, for most people, 99% of people, not necessary. You pray because prayer for protection, Ma will always respond, right? But there kind of, some of these forms also, their sadhanas and the tantras melt a little bit into magical practices. So that's puts you in a different category. Where samya forms, it's just mostly it's devotional practices, and devotion is not dangerous generally. Actually, it's the most dangerous of all things. There's nothing more. Careful. Love is sticky and it won't go away and it ruins your life.
Love is all there is.
Yeah, that's the problem. What if you want something else to be there? It ruins all your plans, for sure. Anything else? Yes.
I was just listening to your Nashingadev talk,
Uh-huh.
and can't say the names, but those who are cursed to become demons, and I guess kind of live out this sentence, but also not forget God.
Yes.
In that, can you speak to, like, let's say someone losing God or using their wings to fly away from God, to use a phrase that I've heard here.
Yeah.
Versus a demon who, with such hatred and like aversion to God,
Yeah. So this is a story in the Shingadev Lila that I get it right. It was 4 Kumaras. The 4 Kumaras went to go see Vishnu. All right, went to go see Vishnu, and these are 4 little naked boys, right? They're so they show up at the gate of the king of heaven, not only king of heaven, the king of heaven, the king of kings, Lord of lords, Lord of hosts, Lord of the Most High, conquering Zion, conquering Lion of the tribe of Zion, right? The true king, right? So he doesn't get, and so they don't let him through. Of course, they don't let him through. The Chotidar is what is it? Chokidar, the gatekeepers, Jaya and Vijaya, right? And so these little boys, they don't realize these are the sons of Brahma. These are Paramahansa, supremely enlightened beings, right? And so they get easily upset, right? And they curse them for this, their sin of insulting these sages, right? And they say, may you fall from heaven, right? When you leave Vaikuntha, right? Of course, that's a big. To the eternal attendance of Lord Vishnu, right? And in every loka where Vishnu is, like Jaya and Vijaya, when Vishnu is born, Jaya and Vijaya are born. He's always there, right? They're cursed to be separated, right? Then Vishnu, and some of the versions of the story, go to the 4 Kumaras. He says, "Please forgive my attendants. They're only doing their job, right? The gatekeepers have a hard job. I sometimes think." In India, the gatekeepers are more powerful than the whoever they're protecting. Sometimes it's not an easy thing. Please mitigate please take away your curse. It says like curse can't be taken away. But then he says, same thing as Narada, as I mentioned, good will come from this, right? Lord Vishnu tells the Jaya and Vijaya, they're very powerful in Sanskrit. It's one of the things that gets hair stand on end. Like I said. don't worry, ultimately good will come from this, right? And so they have to fall, and they have to take 3 births, right, in demon as demons, right? And the final birth is as Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha in the Bhagavatam, both of which are killed by Vishnu as Varaha and Narasingha, right? Ultimate good, they were liberated and attained their divine abode of Vaikuntha again, right? But because of this, we have the stories of Varaha and Narasingha. So now when we're scared, we can pray to Narasingha, right? Narasingha, the story of Narasingha is liberating to all of us, not just to two beings, right? So ultimate good came from them. And there's a type of in the story, there's a technical term I'm forgetting just now, a type of bhakti that comes from hatred, right? That because they're so absorbed. Kamsa had the same type of, he was so obsessed with Krishna killing him, right? And so much hatred for Krishna and hatred and fear of Krishna that his mind became completely absorbed. And result of which, if you're completely absorbed in God, that's called liberation, right? He gets liberated, right? So Hiranyakashipu also, and so all the characters, there's 2 other births. I think they were born in Ram Lila and Krishna Lila, I believe, right? I think it's Ravana and Kumbhakarna, perhaps, and Kamsa and something like that. They were born 3 times, each time killed by Vishnu, right?
Given an option.
What's the option?
They had many lives.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Maybe that's part of this. Some of the versions, like I said, there's many versions of the story. One of which is that they're given an option. You can have like 1,000 lives as a devotee and eventually come back, or have 3 lives as a demon and come back. Right? It's all technically saying lives as a demon because they wanted so much to get back to Vaikuntha to be with Vishnu. Right. So the fastest path. This is not encouraging you to have hatred for God as your path to God. But it is a form of meditation. I mean, we are given that example in the scriptures that everything, if it's focused on God, will bring good, right? It's like we don't even have. I kept blaming everybody like nobody has. We can't even hate God properly, you know, right? I know people who hate. I've met people who claim to hate God, but they don't even think of God. They don't hate anything, right? If they hated God, they'd be something. At least a demon has some power, you know. Most people do have no power, right? So it's interesting that in that story, so in which case being a demon who's fearful of God, right, is good. But
And who did one of the earrings? The bells?
you get all these stories. Gantavarga. Yeah, Swamiji's mentioning there's lots of different stories. We're getting beyond our topic, but anyway, these are good stories to think about. Gantavarga, he was a fanatical Shaivite in the stories, right? And he hated Vishnu. So much so that he put bells, like I have Rudraksha earrings. I'm a fanatical Shaivite too. I have Rudraksha earrings, right? But they don't have bells. So every time he hears the name of Vishnu, he'd do this, and the sound would block out the name of Vishnu. So he had them like this. And there's a couple famous stories. One of the famous stories is that Vishnu, in order to teach him a lesson, Shiva, in order to teach him a lesson, took on the form of Harihara, half Vishnu, half Shiva, right? And while he was doing puja, right? And so he hated Vishnu and loved Shiva. So he took his thumb and plugged the nose of Shiva and offered incense only to Vishnu. Or plugged the nose of Vishnu and offered smoke. So he's giving an example in the ancient world of fanaticism. Like the one God, and this happened. He's a classic story like this. But in one place, he was told that he wanted I don't remember the story perfectly, but yeah, he hated Vishnu he hated Shiva so much. I forgot why do we bring this up? It's a good story.
Hatred as a
Yes.
kind of path.
There was a time at the Hare Krishna temple in Berkeley that the kirtan was really loud. Right, the only mode of kirtan was the big womp, the big cymbal. There's no quiet kirtan. There was only really loud kirtan. We're at a point where we couldn't go. I mean, we'd have to. You couldn't go because of his ears problem. It was always like so loud, And our friend Igor, if some of you, a few of you maybe remember Igor, he's very fond of that temple, and he says that Ganthavarga is the presiding deity there, where it's the cymbals are so loud you can't hear Krishna's name. It's like so loud, right? But yeah, very interesting. He's an interesting character. But there's many. I forget that there's a story of how he eventually went to Badrinath to worship. So he wanted liberation, and he went to Shiva and said, "We have to go to Vishnu. Vishnu is the Lord of liberty. He's Mukti. He's Mukunda. He'll give liberation." And he immediately shook his ears hearing the name of Vishnu, right? But eventually he went there and asked him, "So what do you?" He heard. I remember the story. He heard that if you make a sacrifice to Vishnu, he loves sacrifice. So if you make a sacrifice to Vishnu, he'll give you liberation. So he went and said, okay. So he said, "Oh, what does Vishnu like? He likes Brahmins. Go Brahmana Hitayat. He loves Brahmins." So he killed a Brahmin and offered him to Vishnu. The stories are extreme, they're sectarian and extreme, right? But Vishnu, because his nature is anybody who gives anything to him, he gives blessings. So he attained that. Even this fanatical Shaivite got liberation because he still made an offering. So the thing is, even out of hatred, out of whatever, the stories are usually any connection to God will give a blessing. Right? So, okay, enough of that. Jai Guru, Jai Sri Guru Maharaj Ji ki Jai, Jai Mahamai ki Jai, Swamiji Maharaj Ji ki Jai, Ma Dakshineshwari Bhavatarini, Dakshina-Kali ki Jai, Narasingha Bhagavan ki Jai. All right. Yeah, we'll do arati, and if I can get my knees to move. Ganthavarga. I think Ganthavarga. Or Gantha-karna means ear, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Gantha, it's something, bell ears, not bell. Is the name right? Om Sarvamangalamangalayan Varinyam Varanam Shubham Narayanam Namaskritya Sarvakarmanikare Mangalam Gurudevaya Vimatriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Vindevya Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Shri Guru Vishwarajam Brahmanam Brahmana Om Vishnu. Om Vishnu. Om Vishnu. Om Dhar Vishnu Parandaram Sarapashinta Savidu Shakiratatam Om Abhavita Vikrava Sarvavastum Vitupiva Yakripam Harikyatam Sabhaya Bhayantra Sitsihi Sri Vishnu Sri Vishnu Sri Vishnu Vidam Nai Vidam Hakalabaidava Sahita Om Krintum Dakshina-Karikaye Debye Namaha. Jai जय मां दक्षिणे श्री दक्षिण काली की
जय।
जय मां भवतारिणी दक्षिण काली की
जय।
जय भगवान श्री रामकृष्ण परमहंस देव की
जय।
जय जगन्माता श्री शारदा देवी की
जय।
युगाचार्य स्वामी विवेकानंद महाराज जी की
जय।
पूर्णा तीर्थ रक्षणेश्वर धाम की
जय।
नमः पार्वती पतये
हर हर
Yeah. Careful with the lights. Amazing.
स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। ॐ जननीं शरदां देवी रामकृष्णं जगद्गुरुं पादपद्मे तयो श्रित्वा प्रणमामि मुहुर्मुहुः। ॐ गुरु ब्रह्मा गुरु विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परं ब्रह्मं तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते राधकन्दमुस्तुते तप्तकञ्चनगौरङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरि वृषभानुसुते देवी नारायणी हरिप्रिये। ॐ नमः शिवाय शान्ताय करुणत्राय केवले निवेदयामि चन्मानं त्वं गतिस्त्वं परमेश्वर। काली काली महाकाली कालिके परमेश्वरी सर्वानन्दकरे देवी नारायणी नमोस्तुते। श्री गणेश शारदोभ्यो नमः। शिव काली शिव काली 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 शिव 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 दुर्गा शिव दुर्गा 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 शिव शिव Durga, Shiva, Shiva. भवतारिणी दक्षिण काली की रामकृष्ण परमात्मा देव की जय जय नित्यानंद अद्वैत गौरांग जय जय नित्यानंद अद्वैत गौरांग नित्य 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 गौरांग जय जय नित्यानंद अद्वैत गौरांग जय जय नित्यानंद अद्वैत गौरांग जय जय यशोदानंदन सच्चिदानंद गौरचंद्र जय जय यशोदानंदन सच्चिदानंद गौरचंद्र नित्य गौरांग 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 जय गौरांगा नित्य गौरांगा जय गौरांगा नित्य Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga,
Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga,
Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga. Jai Jai Rohini Nandam Bolo Ramani Nandam. Jai Jai Mahavishwadutaro Sri Advaita Chandra. Jai Jai Godadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Sarvagrupa Sanatana Raya Ramananda. Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Nitai Gauranga, 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 Nitai Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga,
Very Bengali.
Ubala.
satyavati sanatani gunashraye gunamaye narayani namostute nagacharinartha paritrana parayane sarvasatri hare devi narayani namostute jaya narayani namostute jaya narayani namostute jaya narayani namostute jaya narayani namostute jai महामयी की जय जय भगवान श्री राम कृष्ण देव की जय जय स्वामी जी महाराज जी की जय जय माँ दक्षिणेश्वरी भवतारिणी दक्षिणकाली की जय जय माँ drum lessons coming.
Pretty good. I've missed several weeks in a row though.